This year, I set out to see how tall I can grow tomato plants in my garden, and although they're pretty tall, I'm not really satisfied. And it is worth starting out by saying this probably is not the most practical way to grow tomatoes. Nobody wants to use a ladder to harvest tomatoes. May I instead recommend growing your tomatoes over an arch? Don't see this too often, but this worked out really good. I can still reach my tomatoes. It's a nice way to enter the garden. Hello, wine caps. Now, I'm not satisfied because I was shooting for plants that were at least 20 feet tall. And like a lot of things I do, I started to neglect this experiment later in the season. So we're going to measure these tomatoes to see how good we actually did, to see how tall they are. But before we do that, I want to talk about the steps to growing super tall tomatoes and why some of the steps I missed made me fall short of my goals. Number one factor to growing tall tomatoes is going to be variety and disease resistance. You need tomatoes that are indeterminate, which basically means they're vining type and they will not die until frost kills them. Our number one enemy with tomatoes is blight. And while blight has taken out many of our heirloom tomatoes, the late blight resistant hybrids are doing pretty good. The variety I chose is Cherry Bomb, and it is late blight resistant. The second factor is going to be nutrition. We all know that tomatoes are really heavy feeders. And the final factor is pruning. Put all these factors together and you can grow tomatoes that will impress your friends and family. With variety selection, I think we nailed it going with the cherry bombs. I definitely recommend growing cherry bombs in your garden. For heavy producers, blight resistance make these a tomato that you can grow all season and not have to worry about blight. As far as fertilizer goes, I'm really lucky with my permaculture setup that I really don't have to fertilize anything in here. But when you're trying to grow the biggest, tallest tomatoes, you're going to need some extra nutrition. So these tomatoes did get like 2 doses of chicken compost from the chicken composting system, just a light dusting. And I know that helped these plants grow, but we could have definitely added a lot more chicken compost to these plants to get them even taller. So for next year's tall growing experiment, we are going to load these suckers up. And the crew is hard at work. The key factor for these tall tomatoes was pruning and support. For support, I'm using 3/4 EMT conduit. In my opinion, this is by far the best way to support indeterminate tomato plants. These plants have survived everything Mother Nature could throw at them. I'm going to link to my video about this support system. Hopefully you'll check that out and tell your friends. As far as pruning goes for these tomatoes, we did the single stem method. You can see here the plant comes out in one single vine all the way up. If you're growing indeterminate tomatoes or trying to grow really tall tomatoes, single stemming is the way to go. I've done a couple videos on tomato pruning, but basically the idea here is single stem. So anytime suckers form, like these guys here, we take those off. We don't want any of that excess side growth. As the fruits ripen, we take off all the side branches all the way up to the first fruit cluster. Because we don't want any of that energy going from the soil into those bottom leaves, we want it to concentrate where the fruiting is actually happening, or in my case, the vertical growth. So here's where I shortchanged myself. So ideally, you want to get these suckers when they're really small, like even before they only get this big. And here's why. Let's look at this plant as an example. Now, I didn't go for the vertical height with this. I was just trying to train this over this arch here. So I did leave some of the suckers up here to go off to the side. But I got a little bit of sucker action going on down here. Now you take a look at this. This is about 12 inches of plant growth. So when I get a plant that has a sucker growing like this is just telling me that I am losing about a foot of growth on top of my plants. If I kept up with all the suckers on here, as soon as they formed into little suckers and got rid of them, all that extra growth would go vertical. Early in the season, I did pretty good. I got the suckers when they just started forming. But later in the season, I'd come back to suckers that were 6 inches to a foot long, which means I missed out on that extra vegetative growth. Let's take a stroll up this really wobbly ladder here and take a look at what we got. Not a really solid platform. It does give us a really nice view of the garden from overhead. But look at this here up top. A lot of sucker action. Missed a lot of these suckers up here. Real big sucker right there. That's about 13 or 14 inches of growth I could have had on the top if I would have removed this early on. Looking at the extended forecast, I should have like a week left in the season, but we have really high temperatures for fall. So there's probably another 3 or 4 weeks of growth left. But just the fact that I missed some of this, I'm not shooting for the extra couple feet I could get here. This is going to be my last pruning of the season because I also really don't want to extend these up any higher. I'd probably have to put the ladder in my truck bed to get up to them. So I'm going to leave these plants how they are right now and kind of let them grow and just fold over the top and hang down. But now we are going to get a measurement of these plants. It's not going to be the final measurement. I'll probably come back one more time after the frost kills these plants to see how tall they actually grew. I'll come back in the comment section to give that new measurement. So let's go ahead, get a tape measure, and see how we did. Since I'm an electrician, I'm going to use the old stick rule. There's 6 feet, there's 12, and there's our last 30 inches. We probably lost a couple inches because of the bowing coming out of this support, but we're not going to worry about that. So our final height measurement is 14 feet and 6 inches. Not too bad, but we can do better. And we will do better next year. If I had to guess, I'm going to say these plants are going to tickle the 16-foot range before the frost takes them out. So make sure you stay tuned and look back at the comments because I'm going to put that final measurement in the comments once these are shot. If you enjoyed this video, make sure you like the video. If you want to see me do better next year, subscribe so you can see that video. If you want to talk about tomatoes, just hit me up in the comments. Thanks for watching.